Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into Mauritania, which is a land truly defined by intense, dramatic dualities. It operates as the ultimate geographic and cultural fulcrum in Northwest Africa. It's this absolutely fascinating place where ancient caravan routes literally meet modern global energy demands, and where deeply rooted cultural divides shape everyday life.
1,030,000 square kilometers. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the massive, sprawling scale of Mauritania. And to put that vast territory into perspective, 90% of it is completely swallowed up by the immense Sahara Desert. It is huge.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to map our journey through this nation across 5 key areas. First, the desert crossroads. Second, empires and colonization. Third, a divided identity. Fourth, human rights and turbulence. And finally, the resource paradox.
Starting off with Section 1, the desert crossroads. It really is a bridge between two worlds.
Picture this. You're standing in the capital, Nouakchott. You've got the sweeping Atlantic Ocean right in front of you, but the very moment you turn inland, the vast Sahara and savanna completely take over. Mauritania is the ultimate geographic, cultural, and economic bridge between the Maghreb, the Arab nations of North Africa, and sub-Saharan Africa to the south. It's essentially a sandwich of competing cultures and civilizational approaches.
Now, the country has a population of about 4 million people, and they are 100% Muslim. But beneath that shared faith, there's a deep ethnic and cultural division that shapes their entire society. On one side, you have those of Arab-Berber descent, historically known as the Moors. And then on the other, you have black African ethnic groups like the Pular, Soninke, and Wolof, as well as the Haratins, who are of mixed Arab and black ancestry. Historically, relations between these groups have been pretty fraught with friction and mistrust.
Moving on to Section 2. Empires and colonization, the shifting sands of power.
Think about this. From roughly 700 to 1500 CE, this whole region was a massive, bustling trans-Saharan trade hub. It was deeply tied to the legendary Mali Empire, constantly moving salt, gold, and ideas across the desert. Fast forward to 1905 and French colonization begins, which eventually hardened the boundaries of what we now know as Mauritania today. The country finally achieved independence on November 28, 1960, under its first president, Mokhtar Ould Daddah. But, as we see so often, independence didn't automatically mean stability. In 1978, Daddah was ousted in a military coup, which kicked off decades of military rule and profound political instability.
Which brings us to Section 3, a divided identity, the cultural and social friction.
Those hastily drawn historical borders we just talked about left Mauritania with some deep-seated, complex cultural friction between its Arab and black populations. To really understand the power dynamics here, we have to look at their social structures. Take the Tegnat, for example. It's a traditional lineage system that identifies a family with a single ancestor, and it's primarily utilized by the Arab-Berber majority. So why does this matter? Well, because in Mauritania, this Arab-Berber demographic customarily holds the reins of political power, which often ends up marginalizing the sub-Saharan African populations to the social and political fringes.
And the political rhetoric surrounding this divide has been incredibly intense over the years. Just to give you an idea, back in 2002, a presidential candidate named Ould Medouna openly spoke of the need to, and I quote, expunge the stain on the Moor homogeneity and paint the country white, referring directly to the Arab identity. It really illustrates the intense, racially charged atmosphere that has historically accompanied the state's policies of Arabization.
So how was this Arabization actually put into practice? A crucial part of it was through education. After independence, the state heavily utilized mahadras, which are traditional non-formal Islamic schools. These mahadras were essential because they provided contingents of teachers at a very low cost, allowing the newly independent state to rapidly Arabize the whole schooling system. The heavy focus on the Quran and the Arabic script profoundly shaped the national identity, though sometimes that came at the expense of broader scientific literacy.
Let's look at Section 4, human rights and turbulence, the struggle for equality.
The historical record here is pretty stark. In 1989, severe bloodshed between Arab Moors and black Africans resulted in 70,000 refugees fleeing into neighboring Senegal. Furthermore, the country wrestles with a deeply entrenched legacy of slavery, and authorities have frequently repressed modern anti-slavery movements. Even more recently, in 2020, protests against the government resulted in a severe media clampdown, the arbitrary arrest of political opponents and journalists, and, incredibly, a complete 3-week nationwide internet blackout just to silence dissent.
And this turbulence actually extends right into the legal system itself. Mauritania operates under a really tricky duality. You have Islamic Sharia and customary law running alongside a secular legal system. This duality frequently leads to discrimination, actively limiting women's rights, particularly when it comes to crucial everyday issues like divorce, inheritance, and basic social protection, mainly because conservative interpretations of customary laws still remain dominant.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the resource paradox. Massive wealth versus pervasive poverty. Here is where things get truly wild. An astonishing 81.8% of Mauritania's exports are mineral and fuel products. The nation is incredibly resource-rich. They are Africa's top iron producer, the world's second-largest fish exporter, and they possess massive gold and copper reserves. The sheer amount of wealth flowing out of the ground and the ocean is absolutely staggering.
But contrast that massive wealth with the number 150. Out of 165 countries on the Human Development Index, Mauritania ranks 150th. Despite the billions in resources, the country suffers from pervasive poverty, a massive youth bulge with high unemployment, and widespread malnutrition. The wealth is simply not trickling down to the rural or marginalized populations at all.
And compounding all of these economic struggles are some really severe environmental threats. Rampant deforestation for timber and fuel directly accelerates widespread desertification, which is, devastating in a country that's already 90% desert. This leads to a massive loss of viable agricultural and pastoral lands, which ultimately results in increased vulnerability and crushing poverty for the rural communities who depend entirely on that land to survive.
So you might be wondering, how does the international community respond to all of this? Well, a British emissary to Nouakchott summed it up pretty clearly, noting that foreign relations frequently focus on, quote, economic issues, rather than more contentious political issues which might provoke more public upset. Essentially, foreign partners are eyeing those vast mineral and fishing resources, so they frequently prioritize economic stability and counterterrorism cooperation over pushing for internal human rights or political reforms.
So, what does the future actually hold for Mauritania? Right now, the horizon is completely dominated by one massive development: offshore gas. Under President Ghazouani's government, Mauritania is poised for a huge incoming economic windfall. As Western demand urgently pivots its energy sources away from previous suppliers, Mauritania's newly discovered offshore gas reserves have suddenly made it a key player in global energy security.
Which really leaves us with a massive question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Will Mauritania's new massive gas wealth be the catalyst that finally unites this desert crossroads, funding education, infrastructure, and equality? Or will it simply flood a fractured system with cash, deepening the historical divides and enriching a select few? That's what we'll have to wait and see.